The following is a hockey podcast out of Vancouver and Surrey, British Columbia. It'll only consist of a lot of puck talk and even more BS, or in actual words, banter and satire. Enjoy, and as always, go Canucks go.
Quinn Hughes has a new best friend, and his name is not Philip Hronek. What?
You're Locked On Canucks, your daily podcast on the Vancouver Canucks, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, welcome to another episode of Locked On Canucks. My name is Trevor Beggs, co-host of Locked On Canucks, and also a Canucks writer since 2013, currently with Daily Hive Vancouver. Before we dive into today's episode, we got to thank you, I'm talking to you, for tuning into Locked On Canucks. You know why? Because it is your Canucks every damn day. We're part of that Locked On Podcast Network. They're doing the most for sports fans across the world. And for our show, if you haven't done so already, make sure you go like, subscribe, follow for free on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts. And even in the middle of August, the sponsor's still helping us out. And today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Go download that Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms, they do apply. The Canucks defense underwent a dramatic change last year. I'm still shook that this coaching staff was able to rehabilitate Tyler Myers, turn Noah Juleson into an everyday defenseman. But I think there's a good chance that the defense next season could look different as well. And let's get into some of the rumblings on that side on this episode of Locked On Canucks. And I think one of the big decisions that the Canucks have to make next year is whether or not they decide to keep Quinn Hughes and Philip Hronek together once again. Now, you might have heard me and Kyle talk about it a couple of weeks back. And if you're an everyday or you're still tuning in every day, we appreciate the hell out of you, man. Again, we're on August 8th, okay? Went every day through July, now down to part-time this week, but we still got your back here on Locked On Canucks. But one of the points I made when we were doing our lineup projection episode from a couple of weeks ago was that I have a hard time seeing the Canucks not starting Quinn Hughes and Philip Hronek to begin the season. I mean, that pair was so good together last season. They were together for most of the postseason, most of the regular season. And the reason to separate them, though, is because the depth on this team on defense, it's the weakness of this team on paper right now. And again, below them, Susie, Myers, Forward, Desharnais, you got a lot of big bodies. But do you have a solid NHL defense? There's a good argument that one of the best ways to rectify this problem would be to split up Hughes and Hronek. And it seems like there's some rumblings on that side as well. You know, Thomas Drance, the Athletic, was putting the tea leaves together based on his interview with Tocchet from a week or two ago. And, you know, even at the end of season presser, you know, it seemed like both Tocchet and Alvin were more willing to see what Hronek can do on a pairing by himself. So, for next season, is there not a good chance, if we're reading the tea leaves, that is not Philip Hronek with Quinn Hughes, and is not Tyler Myers with Quinn Hughes like Kyle Bowen said a couple weeks ago? Is there a chance that it's big old Vinny Desharnais playing with Quinn Hughes? What? I think on the surface, it's an odd idea, right? I mean, Vincent Desharnais, he's barely played in the NHL. What, he's got 130-something games? We'll figure that out for you quickly here. 114 games, one full season in the NHL. We're asking this guy to play with the best defenseman in the NHL? Is he ready for that? Maybe. Again, watching more Vinny D tape, I think the playoffs were not his moment to shine, right? And what we talk about a lot with these Vancouver Canucks is you had a lot of players in the postseason for the first time who were still, you know, figuring it out more or less, figuring out what playoff hockey is all about. And I think there's a good argument that it was the same for Vincent Desharnais and the Edmonton Oilers. Because, yeah, when the puck was on his stick, he started to freak out a little bit. To me, it was almost like he was a bigger version of Noah Juleson. But you know who actually performed well with Quinn Hughes was Noah Juleson, right? Because it's Quinn freaking Hughes. You don't really have to overthink it in terms of who should I play with this guy? Who you play with Quinn Hughes is not the biggest problem on the team. The problem on the team right now is the depth on defense. And that's why more and more, when I look at this Canucks defense on paper, I think there's a good chance that Vincent Desharnais is the guy that they're going to try playing with Quinn Hughes right off the bat here. You know, you heard this management team talk about it. They think there's a lot of untapped potential in Vincent Desharnais. Look, some of the tape is pretty flattering in terms of his defensive game. He's good positionally. He's good on the penalty kill. He was a good defensive defenseman during the regular season before, he got exposed a bit in the postseason. But again, Quinn Hughes, I think he can play with anyone. I could probably play with Quinn Hughes. No, okay, that's gone too far. But the reason I think Vincent Desharnais might be the number one choice to play with Quinn Hughes is because I think that gives you the best chance at a balanced defense. Right? So if the pairs shake down like this, you're going to go Hughes and Desharnais on your first pairing. And look, I imagine Hronik's going to get some of those minutes too. Or maybe Tyler Myers gets some of those minutes too. You spread it out, but have Vinny D as the primary guy to play with Quinn Hughes. On the second pair, it's Soucy and Hronik. Soucy and Hronik. And again, I think for Carson Soucy, this would be the first time in his career that he's being penciled in as a number 3 guy. Look, Carson Soucy for most of the last season was a number 5 guy. I mean, you could argue maybe a number 4 guy in the playoffs behind Zadorov and Hughes and Hronik. But you look at Soucy's minutes, and the Canucks ran their top 2 with Hughes and Hronik in a bottom 4. I mean, even if Soucy was, let's say, your number 4 defenseman, he's still kind of playing those bottom pairing minutes. So this could be a huge jump for Carson Soucy as well, and that's something that I'm not sure if we're talking about enough. He played well last season, but he played half the games, right? Like, I believe in Carson Soucy based on what I saw last year, but that is a big jump. But again, pairing him with a guy like Filip Hronik, that's who Filip Hronik has had success with in the past. I mean, playing with Quinn Hughes is a whole different animal. But with the Detroit Red Wings, Filip Hronik succeeded when playing with a steady partner with more of a defensive inclination to his game. One of his best partners in Detroit, and this is saying something because he had a lot of bad partners, Olli Maatta. When he was with Olli Maatta in Detroit, really solid numbers for Filip Hronik. When he played with some really bombastic, bad defensive defensemen, the Ben Sherratts and the Jonathan Ericssons and the Patrick Nemeths, his game fell off a cliff. So I do think there's a recipe where it's Hughes, Desharnais, Soucy, Hronik, and then that leaves your bottom pairing of Forbort and Myers. And I think, Myers, obviously there's the opinion on Myers have changed, right? I think people see him as more of a legitimate defenseman. Some fewer mistakes in his game last season, although they were still there. But I think Forbort and Myers gives you just a tad more puck moving on your bottom pairing as opposed to Forbort and Desharnais. Forbort and Desharnais, quite honestly, scares me. That scares me because those guys got to play 50 minutes, maybe 12 minutes at even strength for your Vancouver Canucks. Neither of them are known for moving the puck very well. At least Myers, although he makes mistakes, is a better puck mover than both Forbort and Desharnais. So the more and more I think about it, I think Hughes, Desharnais, Soucy, Hronik, Forbort, Myers might be the best recipe for the Canucks on defense next season. And remember, Vincent Desharnais, he's going to be better than Darnell Nurse. Shout out to Kyle Bowen for that episode back in early July. Go check that one out if you haven't already. You can also check out the latest episode we did of Locked On Canucks. We did the quick one on Brock Besser, but we also did one talking more about Quinn Hughes and Kyle and I, our camping adventures. You can go check that one out on Locked On Canucks, wherever you listen to podcasts. Let's keep the ball rolling on the other side here on a sunny Thursday in August. My vacation's coming up. My short, quick vacation to Ontario is coming up. But on the other side, I want to talk about a couple things, and that's the Canucks D-men who are on the cusp of making this team last season. Let's dive a little deeper down the roster and talk about the names who probably won't start the season in the NHL, but should at some point play NHL games next season. What's the order looking like in terms of call-ups? And then maybe to end off the show, we'll look at the Canucks defense in 2027. What? And get to some of your comments as well. All that coming up here on Locked On Canucks, your Canucks every day after we shout out our friends over at Game Time. Something about the summer, man, gets me in a spending mood. And I know if I'm spending money on tickets, the place that I'm going to go is Game Time, baby. Because with Game Time, they got that lowest price guarantee. That means there's nowhere else you should be going if you're buying tickets for anything, right? Whether that's sports, concerts, comedy, theater, all of that good stuff, okay? And Game Time, they got killer last-minute deals, all-in prices, views from your seat, and that lowest price guarantee. They truly do take the guesswork out of buying tickets. With those last-minute deals, often with tickets for sports, the prices go down the closer it gets to game time, right? People are trying to offload those tickets. They're trying to score you a deal. So sometimes with the last-minute deals, you can save up to 60% off buying last-minute tickets for sports, concerts, comedy, theater, and more. And again, on the app, they got the all-in pricing. There's no surprise fees at checkout. And again, lowest price guarantee. What are you doing? Go use Game Time. We'll take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Go download that Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed.
Man, we're going to have a lot of fun tonight in Vancouver, all my real fans.
All right. You're back here on Locked On Canucks. Your Canucks every day. Or as one of the commenters said the other day, and I read it, shout out to Jacob Lee, shout out to people, each and every one of you who comments, whether it's positive or negative. He was saying that I should say our Canucks. Because when I say your Canucks, does it insinuate that I'm not a fan? As you might know, I'm probably one of the biggest fans of this team. Up there with you and you and you. So should it be our Canucks every day? But hey, you see, I'm a company man. Locked On likes that. Your team, your Canucks. But it is our Canucks, right? It's not just your Canucks. It's my Canucks too. My happiness hinges on their success, much like yours does. And thankfully, they gave us something a little bit more to cheer about last season. Now, I'll get to some of your comments later on in the show, but Vincent Desharnais, do you think that he should be the primary guy that gets a shot with Quinn Hughes in training camp? Just a reminder, offensively, this guy has 1 goal and 16 points in 114 career regular season games. If you want to throw playoffs into that, he has 1 goal in 142 career NHL games. He's not going to score a lot of goals, but it doesn't really matter. If he can defend and hold his own on a pairing with Quinn Hughes, it's going to bode well for him. But, again, this is a guy who's faced weaker competition for the most part. If he goes in a pairing with Quinn Hughes, he's going to be facing the best of the best. And, yeah, I do think there'll be some audibles where they switch it up, but it's a big test for Vinny D. But if this coaching staff can work their magic again, much like they did with Myers and Juleson, I think Vinny D is going to be your guy that plays with Quinn Hughes. Now, the Canucks right now have 7 to 8 defensemen on the roster for next season, right? Guys we haven't talked about. We talked a bit about Juleson. Mark Friedman would be the other one. But in terms of call-up options, who are the guys that are going to get the first shot to join the Vancouver Canucks? And let's do a little bit of a ranking here, okay? So, I'm looking at the depth chart right now, and here's some of the guys that left the Canucks from last season and down to Abbotsford. Matt Irwin, mediocre training camp, played with Abbotsford last season. He's a UFA. Philip Johansson, former first-round pick. He went unqualified, and Nick Sisek, who was acquired in the trade for Jack Stednicka, he also went unqualified. He is now since signed in Europe. So some of the options, and I think let's start with the 2 most intriguing call-up options, both on the right side. And the right side clearly is where the Canucks have some more question marks right now, right? But I'm going to start with Cole McWard. I do think Cole McWard, based on what we saw last season with the Abbotsford Canucks, is probably one of the first guys in the call-up line. And again, in terms of Cole McWard, there's not much that's sexy about his game per se. But in the time that I spent watching the Abbotsford Canucks last season, he was one of the best defensemen on that team. Just plays a relatively mistake-free game, a calm game. We spent some time last offseason saying, is this guy the next Chris Tanev? He kind of does profile a bit that way, right? he still has all his teeth intact. Doesn't quite have that warrior look about him as much as Chris Tanev does. But Cole McWard got better and better as the season went on. I thought he was a key player for the Abbotsford Canucks in the playoffs. And again, looking at the defenseman in this organization, I do think Cole McWard, in terms of call-up options, is probably the first guy right now. He's probably the first guy. And a guy who won't like to hear that is Jet Wu. Now, Jet Wu, you've heard the coaching staff down there. Again, they're gone now, Jeremy Colleton. You've heard about him talk about how Jet Wu is, vastly improved over the past couple of seasons. But has he improved to the point where he's going to be a legitimate call-up option in the NHL? I mean, we talk about Podkolzin kind of being on his last chance, his last stand here in Vancouver. Jet Wu was drafted a year before Podkolzin, same draft as Quinn Hughes. And the guy has yet to crack the NHL. I mean, doesn't necessarily bode that well for him. But, last year he put up some numbers that would suggest that maybe he's going to get a chance in the NHL sooner rather than later. So Jet Wu actually led all Canucks defensemen in points last season with 7 goals, 31 points in 62 games, also had 93 penalty minutes. Look, if Jet Wu gets his chance, I think he's a player that this team, this organization, this fan base is really going to like because he plays with that physical edge. Again, not the quickest skater, not really the best puck mover either. But does he have a baseline that's higher than Desharnais even, right? I mean, again, this is deja vu. Last offseason, last year in account, we're talking about Cole McWard playing with Quinn Hughes, a guy who had 5 NHL games to his name. And now it's like, is McWard and Wu also in the running here? Maybe. Based on the money they paid Desharnais, you think probably not unless there's injury. But McWard and Jet Wu are, to me, the top 2 options in the call-up line. Again, both playing on the right side. But I think Cole McWard just has a bit more steadiness to his game. The points weren't as much as Wu's were. He's not as exciting as Wu is. But in terms of just having a baseline, in terms of playing mistake-free hockey, clean hockey, Cole McWard's going to offer you less flash, but a little more dependability than Jet Wu, based on what I've seen down in Abbotsford. Some of the other options on the right side, again, Mark Freeman is the other one. That's really about it for right side guys. They also signed Christian Felton from college as well. I think Christian Felton's got to, prove his worth at the AHL level before he's in the call-up line. On the left side, basically there's a couple of vets and a few prospects, right? There's more guys on the left side in Abbotsford here. Curious to see if any of these guys play the right side or who might go down to Kalamazoo in the ECHL. But I do think, boring name. He's 27 now, but Guillaume Brisebois is probably first up in the call-up line. I mean, he was a guy who looked like he might have made the Canucks training camp last season. He's been trusted by the coaching staff and the NHL level, albeit on different staff, to kill penalties. Again, you talk about dependability. Guillaume Brisebois, much like Cole McWard, is kind of a boring player who's going to offer you a baseline. Christian Wolanin has been one of those guys. He's now 29, who I think for a long, long time has been touted as one of those guys who, if only he got a chance in the NHL, he'd be so good. I just don't know about that with Christian Wolanin. I mean, he was here for a little while under Rick Tocchet during the beginning of his tenure here. Like, I think Christian Wolanin is a fine option. He can offer you some offense, but again, if you're playing a bottom pairing role in the NHL level, you're not really being relied upon for offense. You're being relied upon for your defensive play. Christian Wolanin also battled some injuries last season. He actually only played in 42 games. 29 points, though, in those 42 games. So 2 fewer points than Jet Wu in 20 fewer games. In terms of the other guys on the left side, you got Brisebois, you got Wolanin. I think those are the first 2. And then after that, you have DPD, you have Kirill Kudryavtsev, who I'm really curious to see play next season. And then you have Akito Hirose. I think Akito Hirose has probably fallen down to 5th on the depth chart here. Maybe there's an early season injury, and Hirose's playing well. Maybe he gets the nod, but there's much more intrigue right now in both DPD and Kirill Kudryavtsev. And again, both play somewhat similar games, although DPD is definitely a bit more physical, but the exact same age right now. So right now, I think DPD would have a slight edge over Kirill Kudryavtsev and then Akito Hirose. So in case you missed it, In terms of the call-up options, on the right side, you got Cole McWard. Then you got Jet Wu. On the left side, I would go Breezewa, Wolanin, DPD, Kirill Kudryavtsev, and Akito Hirose. Those are who's in the call-up line for your Vancouver Canucks. How many of those guys will still be around in 2027, though? Maybe I'll touch on that on the other side. Get to some of your comments. Again, you're listening to an August edition of Locked On Canucks. Yeah, without my co-host, I didn't even mention his name. What kind of an am I? God, not even nice. Kyle Bowen, he's got things to do today. That's right. I'm on vacation next week. He'll be filling in a little bit as well if I can't join from Ontario with my lake house Wi-Fi. We'll wrap up the show on the other side with some of your comments. The Canucks decor in 2027. Who's still here? All that's coming up after we shout out our friends over at Indeed. You know, right now it's the middle of summer. Are many people job hunting? I don't think so. I think people are out there in their Speedos and their bikinis working on that tan. But hey, if you are looking for a job or if you're an employer looking to hire, make sure that you use Indeed, okay? If you need to hire, you need Indeed because they are your matching and hiring platform with over 350 million global monthly visitors according to Indeed data. And they have a matching engine that helps you find quality candidates fast. Ditch the busy work. Use Indeed for scheduling, screening, and messaging so you can connect with candidates faster. Indeed, they don't just help you hire faster. 93% of employers agree that Indeed delivers the highest quality of matches compared to other job sites, according to a recent Indeed survey. Indeed, they got it all, okay? They leverage over 140 million qualifications and preferences every day. Wow. And their matching engine is constantly learning from your preferences, so the more you use Indeed, the better it gets. Listeners of the show, you'll get a $75 sponsored job credit. What? To get your jobs more visibility at Indeed.com/lockedon. Just go to Indeed.com/lockedon right now and support our show by saying you heard about it on this very podcast. Indeed.com/lockedon. Terms and conditions apply. Need to hire? You need Indeed. All right, you're back here on Locked On Canucks. I'm Trevor Beggs, the co-host of Locked On Canucks, again, riding solo without my co-host. But that's all right, man. That's all right. We keep trekking on here because we got to do it for the people. Your Canucks, or should I say our Canucks, every damn day. All right. We'll get to a couple of your comments first, but I quickly want to talk about what is the Canucks defense going to look like in 2027, okay? We've talked about how many different defensemen here, 7 call-up options, plus Mark Freeman, plus Noah Juleson, 9, 6. We're talking about 15 different defensemen here on your Vancouver Canucks, right? And one of the guys we didn't talk about is a guy who is more likely than not, unless things go really astray, going to be on the team in 2027, and that's Tom Willander. Tom Willander. Now, one thing I'm curious about is when I think about this defense in 2027, again, we're talking about 3 years from now, you know, you can tell that this Canucks team wants size on their back end. And right now, they have 4 big boys, and they got Hughes and Hronek. Now, you throw in Tom Willander to the mix, and all of a sudden, you got, 3 average-sized guys. So you would expect that the rest of the defense has to have some size to it. Now, I think the 4 guys who you'd be penciling into this team in 2027 are obviously Hughes and Hronek. Probably Hughes and Willander, actually, and Hronek on his own pair with another left shot guy. And then on the third pairing, I would have DPD along with another right side guy. So again, probably a couple holes to fill for your Vancouver Canucks, but that's how the defense would project out right now. And now, do I got to throw a couple of names out there, man? Who are the Canucks going to have on this team in 2027? Who are they going to have? Think about young defensemen right now, man. Oh, man. I mean, look, I would just be searching up the tallest defenseman in the league and see if there's a chance that they could fit in with your Vancouver Canucks in 2027. Drop some comments as well, whether you're watching live, whether you're watching after the fact. What does this Canucks defense look like in 2027? Give us your projections. Who is going to make this team? Is Tom Willander still part of this team? Is one of the forwards going to be used as a trade chip to acquire a defenseman Holy. We'll see what happens. Let's get to some of your comments before we wrap the show here on Locked On Canucks. Infamous, one of the GOATs of commenters. Hronek and Hughes have good chemistry, and when they're always available for each other to pass as a last resort. Now, one of the comments that Rick Tocchet had made recently was, and I think Patrick Allvin kind of alluded to this too, Philip Hronek probably relied a bit too much on Quinn Hughes last season, right? Which isn't a dumb thing to do. When in doubt, give the puck to the best defenseman in the world. But you can also see the flip side too. If we do consider Hronek to be maybe a low-end number one defenseman in the NHL, should he be not trying to make more plays on his own instead of just passing off to Hughes? And I think that's why, for a big part of last season, I wanted to see Hronek play away from Hughes. What can this guy do on his own? And a lot of my take back then was it was contract-based, right? Like, it's a win-win. Either he excels by himself, which is great, or he doesn't excel by himself and you get him at a cheaper contract. That didn't play out. Neither of those happened. And he kind of fell off by his own anyways. So maybe we should listen to good old Begsy there. But yeah, I'm really curious to see what Hronek can do on his own. And I think he's going to get a chance, maybe not to start the season, but at some point, I think he's going to have an extended time on his own pair to see what he can do by himself. Grim Studio with the comment here. Vinny D should be in the press box. I wouldn't be surprised if Noah Juleson was ahead of him. Look, I think that's a possibility, I should say. But based on the money they pay Vincent Desharnais, based on the way that Tocchet, called him and convinced him to sign with his team, based on the money they gave him, I would be surprised if Noah Juleson played ahead of Vincent Desharnais. Now, I don't think it's impossible. That's why you have training camp. That's why you have the preseason. That's the time to prove what you can do. But if that's how it played out opening night, if Vinny D's in the press box and Noah Juleson's playing, yeah, I would be surprised. I would be surprised. All right. Shout out to my ball hockey captain, Aaron Gray. Shout out to Aaron Gray, the best ball hockey GM of all time. He says, we are one injury away on the back end from everything falling apart. I'm scared. This is an interesting point because so much went right for the Canucks last season, and they were a relatively healthy team, right? The star players didn't really miss any time. If there's an injury to Hughes, if there's an injury to Hronek, knock on wood, geez Louise, man. Yeah, that's going to be a scary situation. But I think in this scenario, you do have some trade chips, right? And I think the idea of trading a winger for a defenseman becomes more imperative if there's injuries to the back end, right? We'll see how that goes. Andrew, shout out to Andrew. If you missed the episode with Andrew last week, go check it out. Guy was an absolute beauty. We had fun talking about the goalie situation. Vancouver going from a goalie graveyard to a goalie factory. He says Noah number one, okay? Get Noah Juleson. We got some love for Noah Juleson here, and shout out to Surrey, okay? Look, I'm cheering for Noah Juleson too. I would love to see Noah Juleson come in and surprise people, okay? Maybe he earned a spot aside Quinn Hughes. Who knows what's going to happen? All right. But let's wrap up, get out of here. Again, it's summer, okay? Go back out there. Enjoy the sunshine, okay? I'll get to one more comment. So there's a lot of comments about my hair if you're here on YouTube. Kyle saying, Begsy, why did you chop your flow salad? Now, here's the thing. I like to cut my hair and shave my beard once in a blue moon. So when I chop it off, I like to chop a good chunk of it off, okay? And, yeah, man, sometimes just sit back in the chair and let the barber do his magic. I'm not too worried about how my hair looks, Whether it's the style, whether I'm shaving it all off, it's all good. It's just hair, baby. It's just hair. Hopefully you and your hair are doing well as well. Time to get out of here, though. Shout out to the everydayers, the occasional listeners, the first-time listeners, the new subscribers, and those of you who join us on the live show on YouTube. We love each and every one of you, your family, and your dogs, too. Kyle and I should be back together tomorrow to wrap up the week here on Locked On Canucks. Again, going back-to-back days in a row. We have you covered 4 or 5 days this week. Man, oh man, even in August, it is your Canucks / our Canucks every damn day. But for now, got to get out of here. I'm Trevor Beggs, and thanks for tuning in to Locked On Canucks.
You're Locked On Canucks, your daily podcast on the Vancouver Canucks, Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.